What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. This is Faraz and I'm here with Zach Rizzuto. We're going to go over our quarterback rankings, our running back rankings, as well as going over tonight's extravaganza on Thursday Night Football between the Washington Commanders and the Chicago Bears. I think this is going to be a better game than we think.
Yeah, hopefully better.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Hopefully better than Colts Broncos. I think it'll be better than Colts Broncos. Hopefully.
I think so. That was as bad as it could get, right? So it can't be worse than that one. I don't think it can be. I think Washington can potentially put up some points, right? I think maybe the Bears can get some big runs off, maybe with David Montgomery, maybe. But we'll see. Maybe a little Brian Robinson action tonight. You know what I'm saying? Maybe he can get some stuff going.
yeah, I have him starting my lineup this week. Dire straits for my fantasy team. So let's hope Brian Robinson can do something. Maybe Justin Fields. He looked somewhat serviceable last week. Against the Vikings. And granted, the Vikings defense isn't that good, but hopefully maybe Justin Fields can do something more than what we've seen so far.
Maybe. Well, I'll just say this. Good luck. Because you're going up against me. So ain't gonna matter. Gonna matter.
Right. Did you see the way Amazon Prime was advertising this game this whole week leading up to it, even after the game last week? They were saying it's like,
what was it?
They said it's a no nonsense battle in the NFC. It's like, okay. I feel like it's gonna be all nonsense. It's just gonna be a bunch of broken plays. It's just gonna be a mess of the game.
This is literally the definition of nonsense.
Yeah. You got the Commanders who are looking like poverty franchise, and the Bears, they can only run the ball. So should be interesting, I think. They haven't had many good games on Prime Video so far.
All right, man. Let's get into this Thursday night preview. We've kind of been talking about it already, but kind of more official start to it. So Jahan Dotson's out tonight. Logan Thomas is out. Carson Wentz, he's dealing with the biceps tendon strain, but he's going to play. That could mean more targets to the running backs, also to Curtis Samuel, who runs a lot of his routes closer to the line of scrimmage. It could be a high reception game for him. Kyler Gordon is manning the slot. He's been manning the slot for the Bears. He has been terrible this year. He's allowing more than half a fantasy point per route run against him, and quarterbacks are targeting him more than any other corner on the Bears. So Samuel can be potentially in for a big day. McLaurin, he's going to be matched up with Jalen Johnson, who's been very good in coverage this year. Not looking amazing for McLaurin, especially considering Wentz's injury, his previous not so great fantasy days. I'm still going to have him in my lineup as like a borderline wide receiver 2, maybe low end wide receiver 2 with Dotson out, especially. Diami Brown, he didn't play that many snaps last week. He obviously had those 2 big touchdowns. But he just happened to have a couple big plays. I'm not necessarily betting on that to happen again.
I wouldn't bet on, is it Diami or Diami? I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but I wouldn't bet on Brown replicating that performance. That's the kind of streaky performance that we see from guys like Robbie Anderson. And I feel like that's what it is, and it's going to continue to be. I do like Terry McLaurin a lot more in this matchup, but, Carson Wentz just hasn't been a guy to throw to him. I would have Curtis Samuel ranked higher than Terry McLaurin at this point, especially in this matchup. Like you said, with Kyler Gordon covering Curtis Samuel, if he's in the slot, he's probably going to get those targets, like you said, much to my chagrin, because I am playing against you and you have Curtis Samuel in your lineup this week. So, it looks like it's going to be a decent day. As long as Wentz doesn't look terrible, coming off or working with his injury that he's playing through, I think that they should be in for solid fantasy days.
I think so. I'm not overly excited about these Washington running backs, but if I'm starting anyone, it's Brian Robinson. He controlled most of the running back carry split last week, despite playing less snaps than Antonio Gibson. Chicago is allowing 4.7 yards a carry to opposing running backs, so maybe this can be a bit of a coming out party for Brian Robinson if Gibson isn't too involved. And I can see that split shifting, like in terms of snaps as well, on top of the carries, towards Brian Robinson's way. They're excited to get him back. Both running backs couldn't get anything going on the ground last week. They were both terribly inefficient. But this is a much better matchup for them, and Brian Robinson could potentially do some things.
Yeah, and I think that he has the capability. I think, and I talked about this a little while in the offseason. Not so much once before they talked about Brian Robinson really being the guy, and then his whole accident thing going on. But Brian Robinson, I think that he has the highest upside moving forward, just not only tonight, but also into the season. I think Antonio Gibson is going to kind of take a back seat. Even though Gibson did produce pretty well for you going in these first few weeks of the season, I think that, like you said, the Commanders are much more interested in having Brian Robinson being their guy than Antonio Gibson in the backfield, especially when it comes to early down work. That's not to say that Antonio Gibson can't get a little receiving work, but J.D. McKissic has really been their guy for that. So if anybody's going to be butted out of this backfield rotation, I feel like it's going to be Antonio Gibson, because J.D. McKissic, even though he isn't, catching a bunch of passes like he was last season, they're still using him as the receiving back, and he has that value, I think, locked up. Antonio Gibson's just going to be, spelling Brian Robinson. He's like the guy they're throwing in when one of the other guys, Brian Robinson or J.D. McKissic, isn't. Maybe they need a breather, or if something would happen to them. Antonio Gibson's really just he's like a pinch hitter, I think, at this point in the Washington backfield. Faraz, you're muted.
Thank you, Zach.
I got you.
I
always have your back. Yeah. It looked like you were saying something really interesting.
David Montgomery, you're starting him as an RB2. He got his role fully back last week. Justin Fields, I would say like this week is a solid QB2 because there are 4 quarterbacks on bye, so it kind of bumps him up a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's about it for the Bears offense. Don't start Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, I wouldn't start Darnell Mooney. I wouldn't start any Bears pass catchers tonight, unless we see Justin Fields go crazy. We're not going to be starting any Bears pass catchers till next week, because Justin Fields still hasn't shown that he can support even one fantasy relevant pass catcher in this Bears offense. And David Montgomery has the job locked up as long as he's on the field. We talked about that a little while ago. I think it was 2 or 3 episodes ago. Talked about Khalil Herbert. He didn't really get any boost in the backfield because of his strong performance in David Montgomery's absence. So David Montgomery, and like I said, Justin Fields in a pinch, if you need to, are really the only realistic starts for fantasy football.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. So I'm looking at these underdog plays for tonight. I have Carson Wentz over 14.75 fantasy points.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go ahead and add him. I'm sharing my screen on YouTube. You guys can see it right now. So I'm going to go ahead and throw Carson Wentz in my underdog entry for today. I have Brian Robinson over 11.5 rushing attempts. So, he had 9 last week. And I think against the Bears, they're going to try to get the ball. They're going to try to run the ball with, Carson Wentz and his, arm injury right now that he has. So he's going to attempt to play, but I would assume that since they have these 2 running backs and the Bears have been giving up some yards on the ground, I think they kind of depend on the running backs a little bit in this game, especially with Jahan Dotson out too. So, and Logan Thomas out. So I think 11.5 rushing attempts. I think that's solid for Brian Robinson to go over. I also have J.D. McKissic going over 3 receptions as well. He's had at least 3 receptions in every game this year. And I don't want to touch the Terry McLaurin one here. 4 receptions, 56.5 receiving yards. I'm going to leave that one alone. Yeah. But I'm going to go to Curtis Samuel here. He's at 47.5 receiving yards. I like the over on that. I also like the over on the 5 receptions for Curtis Samuel. So if I had to choose one, I'll probably go with the 5 receptions. So I'll add that in here. Let's see. What else do we have? So if you scroll down here, Justin Fields. I'm not going to touch that one, honestly. David Montgomery, 83.5 rush plus receiving yards is his line here. I'm going to leave that one alone. But Khalil Herbert, 34.5 rushing and receiving yards. I think I'm going to go lower on that one. I think this is David Montgomery's backfield for the most part.
Yeah.
So unless Khalil Herbert gets a big playoff, I might go lower on that one. Does that one make sense?
Yeah, I like that pick. Dave Montgomery's locked it down when he was on the field.
Now, and then you have Darnell Mooney here, 3.5 catches. He only had more than 3 catches like in one game this year. I might go the under on this one.
Yeah, his catches this season have been 1-1, 2-4-2.
Oh my God! So you know what? I'm gonna remove the J.D. McKissic one here, and I'm gonna add the Darnell Mooney lower than 3.5 receptions. I like these picks here. So, you can choose between that one. You can choose between the JD McKissic one. There's also the Curtis Samuel, above, 47.5 receiving yards. That's not bad either. Now, these 5 picks, if I enter these 5 picks, you can see, these multipliers went up all the way because I have 5 picks in here. If I put in $50, my payout is $1,000. Okay, that's 20x. I just turned $50 into $1,000. If I get all of these right. If I wanted to do only 4 picks in this entry, let's say I remove the Carson Wentz one, $50 will still turn into $500. That's 10x right there. Now, let's say I wanted to put, another prop in here, another line in here, and I wanted to add insurance, right? If I get all 5 of these right, usually it'll be $1,000. For my $50, but I just turned on insurance and I still get $500 from my $50 entry, and I can still get one of these wrong. So that's pretty good. So if you're fairly confident in 5 of the picks and you turn on insurance, you can still 10x your money, even if you get one of these wrong. So if this sounds interesting to you, go to Underdog Fantasy, download the app, sign up, and make your first deposit with the code Upper Hand. Your first deposit will be doubled with that code up to $100. So make sure you use the code Upper Hand to get that promo. Okay, that's enough about Underdog. Let's move on to our quarterback rankings. Let's do it. Man, we got a lot to talk about when it comes to quarterbacks this week.
Oh, yeah.
A lot because a lot of these quarterbacks are on bye, so you might see some guys in here. A little Geno Smith in the top 10 over here. First thing you notice.
He's safely in the top 10 with these rankings. He's not just edging on it. He's got what do we have him at 7?
Yeah, man. We have him at 7. So at number 1, we have Josh Allen, followed by Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, and Kyler Murray at 5. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are facing off this week. You're probably starting both of these guys. This over-under is set at 54. That's the highest for the week. The Bills have the highest implied total for the week at 28 points, and the Chiefs are 3rd with 26. So potential fireworks in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. If it looks anything close to what it was, in the divisional round game that we all remember very clearly from last season, it's just going to be fantasy bonanza. Everybody's going to be scoring points. And with, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes being these guys, I'm starting all the receivers. I'm pretty much starting all of the fantasy players on these offenses this week. This is a marquee matchup. Probably the matchup of the year, the one that people have had circled on the schedule since the schedule came out. So Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, I like Josh Allen as the one. Patrick Mahomes, I wouldn't be surprised. We haven't ranked that far. I wouldn't be surprised if they finish 1 and 2. But it seems like every time we say that 2 quarterbacks are going to finish 1 and 2, they don't. So let's just leave it at this. Josh Allen at 1, Patrick Mahomes at 4. Both of them excellent starts. There's no question. Of course, you're starting these guys.
Kyler Murray, he gets a good matchup this week against the Seahawks. They actually have the 2nd highest team implied total for the week. This over-under is set at 50.5 points. I'm looking over at Preciser, which is more of a prediction and analytics tool. You can kind of use that in conjunction with what Vegas has. They actually have the Cardinals only scoring 22 points rather than the 27 points Vegas is expecting. And I can see that because the Cardinals have just been underperforming, right? From expectations.
Right.
But, the Seahawks might be, a good bet here, given that they're 2.5 point underdogs. Preciser actually has them winning this game despite the Cardinals being favored. And I can see that happening, but both the Cardinals and the Seahawks play fast. So I'm expecting a lot of plays to be run, and I'm expecting a lot of fantasy points to be scored. This is another game to target for fantasy.
Right. And you look at the 2 games that the Seahawks have had these past 2 weeks, especially their defense allowing a bunch of points, not only to the Lions, but then also the Saints. Taysom Hill obviously gashed them big time. Kyler Murray is a great quarterback, fantasy quarterback. He's dynamic. He can run. He can pass. This would be a nice spot for the Cardinals offense to kind of morph in the form. I think this is going to be a high scoring game. definitely. You know, the Seahawks offense suddenly is very good, and their defense has allowed a lot of points. That's a recipe for fantasy success. With Kyler Murray coming into town, you know, Cardinals. So I think that Kyler Murray being a 5, I think this is the highest that we've had him ranked, you know, this season so far, and I think it's warranted with the matchup. This is a really good matchup for Kyler Murray, and I'd be disappointed, I think, if he had anything less than 20 points this week.
I think I had Kyler Murray ranked at like 3 week 1 because I was pretty optimistic of him coming into the season. But listen, he's going to have Hopkins coming back soon, and this offense is going to get better, hopefully.
Yeah, it feels like a distant memory. You know, maybe that tells you all you need to know about how the Cardinals have done so far.
Yeah, that's true, man. Tom Brady, we have him here at number 6. He's averaging 368 passing yards over his last 2 games. Tom Brady, man, like, you know, he's back as a fantasy, you know, a reliable fantasy quarterback, I think, you know, with Chris Godwin back, even though Chris Godwin hasn't been lighting up the stat sheet, you know, he's been getting targets, but now a lot of these other receivers are starting to get involved. Now these running backs are starting to catch a lot of passes over the last couple of games. So he's starting to find his footing at this point. So Tom Brady, I think he's going to be locked in to the top 10 almost every single week. And he's inching on that top 5 at some point. The good thing is that this matchup against the Steelers, like, they're allowing a ton of passing yards as well. So Tom Brady is looking like he's like kind of locked in to throw over 300 yards this game.
Yeah, and that's what happens when you allow 400-ish, almost 400 passing yards and a half against the Bills, you know, last week. That's what Pittsburgh did. So I think Tom Brady's a really safe start. I think this might be his best matchup so far this season. And if he could get into a rhythm, you know, get into a groove and find a groove, I think we could be looking at Tom Brady being a mainstay here in the top 10, even the top 8. You know, moving forward, because as his receivers come back, he's getting Chris Godwin. He got Chris Godwin back last week, and he's still getting healthier. Mike Evans is obviously a beast, and Julio Jones is, you know, waiting in the wings to come back. The offense is going to get much better. I like the Buccaneers to win the game. Tom Brady should have no trouble putting up a lot of points in this game.
So yes, we talked about Geno Smith at number 7, and yes, I am playing him over Justin Herbert this week. I have him at 7. I have Herbert at 8. Okay, Geno's balling. Okay, he has a better matchup. He's thrown 7 touchdowns in the last 3 games. Herbert has a tough matchup against Denver. You know, Geno Smith was the one who ended up throwing 2 touchdowns against them in week 1, but since then they've only allowed 1 touchdown pass since week 1. Since Geno Smith did it, no one can do it like Geno.
Yeah.
Now if Keenan Allen comes back this week, I think Herbert gets an upgrade. But I still like Geno Smith to get it done this week in this matchup. For all the reasons we just talked about, you know, just this game just kind of potentially going bananas.
Yeah, definitely. And I was just going to reiterate what you just did. So that's good. We like Geno Smith, obviously. And he could end up staying in the top 10 too, you know, if he keeps having these types of games. I think that the defense allowing a lot of points is what's going to keep Geno Smith producing, at least at the level that he has been. It was good the first few weeks, but he's become great these past 2 weeks.
We have Joe Burrow at number 9, Kirk Cousins at number 10. Miami has given up the 5th most passing yards through 5 games, so I think Kirk should have a solid week. I have Carson Wentz at 11 here. Outside of tough defenses like Philly and Dallas, he's got it done for you, right? Like, so he could potentially get it done tonight. You know, it is a little concerning that he doesn't have Jahan Dotson. It's a little concerning that, you know, he has that elbow injury, but like, I'm kind of okay starting him as a top 12 quarterback because you kind of look at the quarterbacks after him. You're like, for fantasy, you're just like, these guys don't have the same upside that Carson Wentz does. So regardless, he'll likely be in my lineup if I'm looking for a quarterback. You know, Aaron Rodgers, he's at 12. He's been giving you a solid floor, you know, but nothing more than that. The Packers are up there in implied points against the Jets this week through, you know, at 26 points, which is pretty good for the Packers. And that would be tied for 3rd in the NFL. The data prediction tool that we're using, Preciser, it's showing Aaron Rodgers throwing for 260 yards, passing yards this week, which would be his highest this year if he were to hit that. But he could potentially do that against the Jets. The Jets defense has been playing a lot better this year, but they have been giving up some stuff in some spots, and I think Aaron Rodgers could potentially take advantage of it.
Yeah, I like that. You know, Aaron Rodgers, you know, he hasn't been playing bad, but he hasn't been playing like the Aaron Rodgers that we've come to know and love. And he was never, he hasn't been the fantasy producer that he was earlier in his career for the past few years, but he's been getting it done. He's much better off with Davante Adams. Obviously, we're seeing a little bit of a production drop off. I think Davante Adams is what gave Aaron Rodgers his upside, and we're now seeing just the floor Aaron Rodgers, and that's what we've got. And it's not a problem. It's just not what you want, ultimately for your team. And I'm looking at, like you said, Carson Wentz, and then the drop to Aaron Rodgers. I feel like there's a big gap there, splitting the tiers, because after Carson Wentz, you have Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Matthew Stafford, all these guys that are liable to put up 6 points, or less.
Yeah.
Guys that are going to give you duds. I'd say there's 9 guys in the top 20 behind Carson Wentz. I'd say 5 or 6 of them are going to give you duds this week.
Yeah, it sucks because if you ask me, like, hey, who's your quarterback streamer for this week? I'm like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, because it's tough, man. When you have Russell Wilson at 13 against the Chargers, let me ask you a question. Would you rather start Aaron Rodgers against the Jets or Russell Wilson against the Chargers? Because Russell Wilson, he's the Chargers have given up the most passing touchdowns this year, with 10 through 5 weeks. So this is a good matchup for Russ. Potential bounce back here. He is dealing with some shoulder issues, if I'm not mistaken, like an AC sprain or something like that. Who do you think you would put in your lineup if you had the choice?
If I had the choice, I would probably go with Aaron Rodgers here, just because, this is, even though the Chargers defense has been allowed a lot of points and Russell Wilson has been a bit of a funk. Russell Wilson has the injury that he's dealing with. We're not sure how he's going to look coming off that. Apparently, he's been playing through it, so that might be contributing to part of some of his trouble to get on the board and actually performing.
Of course, he has an injury. Of course he does.
Yeah. Maybe it could just be a PR move, damage control, so the move doesn't look as bad. They are paying him $240 million on his contract, so that could be it. But I look at Aaron Rodgers, a healthy Aaron Rodgers at home versus banged up Russell Wilson on the road against a Chargers defense that still has plenty of talent. They've allowed a lot of touchdowns, but there's still a lot of playmakers on that Chargers defense. I don't trust the Broncos defense to look much better against the Chargers than they did against the Colts. I'm happier with Aaron Rodgers in my lineup for this week. The Jets have been better on defense, but I could see this kind of, maybe being one of the unexpected shootouts, because the Jets offense has been pretty good. They can keep up with the Packers easily.
Yes, sir. All right, let's round this out. We have Trevor Lawrence at 14, Stafford at 15, followed by Jimmy G in a good matchup against Atlanta, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson at 18, Brissett at 19, and I have the rookie Kenny Pickett at 20 after his 300-yard passing game last week. Listen, he has weapons, okay? He's going to try to keep up with Tom Brady. Do you think having Kenny Pickett here at 20 is aggressive? I mean, the guys that have him ranked over are like Daniel Jones, Matt Ryan, Marcus Mariota against the 49ers, guys like that.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's aggressive. I think Kenny Pickett fits right in here. He's right underneath Jacoby Brissett. I trust Jacoby Brissett a little bit more to produce for fantasy. But I like him a lot more than Daniel Jones. And like you said, Marcus Mariota would generally be a start, but the 49ers defense has been just lights out. You're not going to get much success against them in terms of fantasy. The touchdowns dealing against the 49ers is pretty much non-existent. So I think Kenny Pickett has a good shot to be at least a decent producer if the Buccaneers would go up. Even if the Buccaneers would go up, I don't think the Buccaneers are going to go up on the Steelers like they did, like the Bills did against the Steelers. But if the Buccaneers would go up, Kenny Pickett can throw again for 300 yards, I think. And that's going to be enough fantasy production for you this week. Chances are you're not starting him. It's not like you had him on your team and you're starting him every week. He's probably a streamer right now for you, and that's all you're looking for.
Yeah, for sure. So I think Kenny Pickett, he has, he looked decent considering all the circumstances, going to Buffalo for his first NFL start, still throwing over 300 yards. I think it's a good sign for Pittsburgh. Right. It was definitely better than what they had. I think Trubisky was struggling. He didn't really understand the offense. He couldn't get anything going. He couldn't utilize the really good wide receivers that he had. You know what I mean? And Pickett seems like he's coming in and he's able to do that. So that's good to see. All right. Let's move on to our running back rankings here. I got Saquon at number 1. The Ravens are allowing almost 5 yards a carry to opposing running backs. And, we know the Giants are going to run the ball, right? It's their entire offense. And despite teams knowing that they're going to run the ball, Barkley's averaging 5.5 yards a carry on the year. The dude's balling out.
Yeah. And there's no question about it. Saquon Barkley, he's looking a lot more like the rookie season Saquon Barkley that was just winning you leagues. He hasn't looked the same since up until this season, but there's no question that the offense in New York runs through Saquon Barkley, and he's going to be getting the ball on the majority of plays. I think that, he's pretty much the undisputed RB1 right now every week that he starts, just because, Christian McCaffrey, he's been good, but he hasn't been what we'd like to see. And Austin Eckler, he's coming off the heels, two straight, very good performances. But nobody's had the consistency like Saquon just yet.
Yeah. Christian McCaffrey, he has a tough matchup against the Rams, but he did have a tough matchup last week also against the 49ers, and he did just fine. PJ Walker is going to be the quarterback for the Panthers this week. I love what he said in his intro press conference. He basically said, I just want to get the ball in my playmaker's hands. And I'm like, man, that's exactly what I want to hear. That's what I'm talking about. DJ Moore, he had 2 starts with DJ Moore over the last, I think, 2 seasons. And in both of those, he had a high target share. And in one of them, DJ Moore went off. So there's a chance that DJ Moore, could get an upgrade with – actually, matter of fact, I would say he does get an upgrade with PJ Walker. I'm just going to say that because it couldn't have gotten. This is the worst DJ Moore has ever done in his entire career. With Baker Mayfield behind center, so there's no way it could get worse. PJ Walker should get the ball in his hands. That's what he said he will do. So let's hope he does it.
And you can't hold it against DJ Moore, or any of the Panthers playmakers for that matter. Obviously Christian McCaffrey's been fine, but Baker Mayfield just, it's kind of really opening everyone's eyes to just the fact that he's just not a good quarterback. So I think that any change is going to be good. They just had change at head coach that might, like I said on was yesterday's episode, that might spur on a little stronger offensive production. If PJ Walker's in there, I like PJ Walker the most out of the quarterbacks I have on the roster right now, just to see what he can do, because we've seen him at least have support some fantasy relevant players, where Baker Mayfield's supporting nobody. Christian McCaffrey's producing despite Baker Mayfield, and everybody else is just, in the doghouse in terms of fantasy points. So I like PJ Walker that he'll be starting.
We got Austin Eckler at 3 here. He has been killing it over the last couple of weeks. Dwayne McFarland from Fantasy Life, he tweeted out last night that Eckler is being targeted at a ridiculous 37% clip against zone coverage, and the Broncos play zone at the 5th highest rate in the league. So you might look at this matchup, on paper and say, wow, that's a tough rushing defense. But, we know where Eckler makes his hay, and that's in the receiving game, even though in the past couple of weeks, he's been getting it done in the run game. So we might be looking at a ton of targets for Eckler this week.
Yeah, I like Austin Eckler. He's actually looking more like the Austin Eckler of old, and there's not much else to say. Like you said, he's getting it done on the ground and through the air. Surprisingly, very well on the ground. Like I said, I think he rushed for his career high 173 rushing yards last week, and we said that was a pretty tough. Was it a pretty tough match? No. Who was he playing against?
He was playing the Browns, I think.
The Browns? Their defense was pretty bad. Yeah. I think it was. I think it was.
Or was that the week before?
Cade York shanked it. Chargers won. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Yes, it was the Browns. So it was a good matchup, but I think Austin Eckler can carry that momentum. He's captured momentum. I don't see this running out against Denver.
I'm with you. We have Nick Chubb at 4 here. The Patriots are a bit of a tougher matchup for him, and that's why I have him down at 4 here. I think we had him at like 1 or 2 last week. But he's known to take away the opposing team's best player. Talk about Belichick here, and you best believe that his game plan going into this week is trying to take away Nick Chubb. He'll try. We don't know if he'll be successful. But Nick Chubb is still at 4. Like, he's not like he's at 10 this week. I'm not overdoing it here. I just like the other guys ahead of him. One common thread with those top 3 guys is that they're all very involved in the passing game. So good chance that Nick Chubb gets it done for you either way this week. He's obviously in your lineup.
Yeah, Nick Chubb is the focal point in the Browns offense right now. Even with Kareem Hunt in the backfield, they're looking to get the ball to Nick Chubb on the ground. And actually, just moving the ball with Nick Chubb has been really good. And we talked, like you said, you talk about the passing game being big for the guys ahead of him. And we said multiple times, Nick Chubb doesn't need that. It doesn't look like to produce at the same level as those guys.
I have Rhamondre Stevenson at 5, and I understand that that's quite aggressive. But without Damian Harris, he's going to be an every down back. Cleveland is allowing the third most fantasy points to running backs. They're allowing 5.8 yards a carry. We talked about what Austin Eckler did last week. That is the second most behind the Chargers in terms of what they're allowing on a per carry basis. They've allowed 6 rushing touchdowns on the year. That's second most. Stevenson's going to have a good week this week.
Yeah, I definitely going to have a good week this week. I'm not sure. Is Mac Jones? Do we know if Mac Jones is going to be back?
We don't know yet. He tried to test out that ankle this week. Yesterday. So he's kind of back in like making throws and things like that. So they're kind of testing it out. They didn't rule him out or anything. They asked Bill Belichick yesterday if he'll play, and he said that we'll see. So obviously, Bill Belichick isn't going to give you any answer to this question or any questions on a Wednesday. He even has Damian Harris as a limited participant in practice. Every single one of the Patriots players on their active roster at least put in a limited practice on Wednesday, even though they're hurt. There was a report, saying that Damian Harris would likely miss a few weeks. So most likely Damian Harris is not going to play this week.
Yeah, and if that's the case, if Mac Jones doesn't play, I think that's what's going to let Rhamondre Stevenson capitalize on, this ranking and actually, make it as the RB5 possibly this week and have this kind of upside. Because with Bailey Zappi at quarterback, we saw last week that the running backs were supremely involved in moving the offense forward. They didn't have too much pressure on them to perform. They were in a positive game script the whole time against the Lions, so that might be skewing it a little bit. But I think that Rhamondre Stevenson, with a full workload, should be just fine. We said he looks really good when he has the ball. And I'd say he's probably their best weapon on offense right now. We know Jacoby Myers is still a little banged up. And with Bailey Zappi at quarterback, it's going to be ground game, throw the ball short, short yardage passes. Rhamondre Stevenson is going to be on the receiving end of a bunch of those. I think that this is a fair ranking, even though it might be a little aggressive. I'm with you on this one.
We have Leonard Fournette at 6 after seeing his usage last week. The snaps were down, but his usage per snap was way up. He had an opportunity to touch the ball on 50% of his snaps last week, which is kind of insane. Probably unsustainable, but the usage we saw last week is why we were drafting Fournette so high, and that's the Fournette that we were drafting. So let's hope that type of usage continues this week.
Yeah, and if I keep talking about this. If the Buccaneers go up on Pittsburgh, it could be just him, pounding the rock, and he could have a really high rushing volume this week. Where the passing volume obviously is what you're looking for more, but I think the rushing volume would be there. I think Leonard Fournette has a really safe floor this week.
And this might be a little bit aggressive with Joe Mixon too, here at number 7. But his league-leading touches are going to turn into fantasy points at some point. He's only had 1 touchdown on the year, and they're coming. Before Baltimore last week, when he averaged 5.57 yards a carry, he went up against some tough rushing defenses: Pittsburgh, Dallas, Jets, Miami. And New Orleans this week is in the middle of the pack. So, they're allowing more yards a carry to running backs than any of the teams that I just mentioned. So, the Bengals are favored in this game. In our sports analytics prediction site that we use, Preciser agrees. They have the Bengals at a 58% chance of winning this game. So I think he continues to get some carries. It racks up those carries on the ground, and I think he bounces back. Hopefully he scores.
Yeah, that's what you say for every fantasy player. Hopefully he scores.
He scores.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying all day on Sunday. But yeah, I like Joe Mixon in this matchup. It might be like you said, it might be like a sneaky performance here that he might get. You wouldn't expect against a talented Saints defense for a running back like Joe Mixon to go off, but he has been getting the volume that we're looking for. And we keep saying it every week that, the production has to catch up to the volume at some point. And at this point, I treat it like a ticking time bomb. He's due for a big day, and it could happen anytime. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened here. And even if he doesn't, the workload is there enough, the volume is there enough that his floor it's not going to leave you out to dry on any given week. I think you're good with Mixon. I like him at 7.
So you do like him at 7. So we have Alvin Kamara at 8. We have Breece Hall at 9. We have Jonathan Taylor at 10. And we'll talk about it. But if you had all 4 of these guys, and you had to start 2 of them, or 1 of them, or 2 of them, who would you be starting out of 7 through 10 here?
Joe Mixon and Breece Hall.
Joe Mixon and Breece Hall. Okay, so I have Kamara at 8. You would have Breece Hall at 8 instead of Alvin Kamara. You would have Alvin Kamara at 9.
I might even say Breece Hall at 7, and Joe Mixon at 8. I think
Makes
I
sense.
have them in a very similar position. They're very similar.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. Like when I look at these 4 running backs, I'm looking at Breece Hall like, man, like every single week it just looks like he's just going to explode, right? Dude, like the Packers are allowing 5.1 yards a carry to opposing running backs. He's here at number 9, and he's also the overall RB9 on the year. He's 13th overall among all players, including wide receivers, in scrimmage yards per game. Breece Hall. So that tells you what you need to know right there. The dude is getting it done. He's productive. And I have him over Jonathan Taylor this week, who I have at 10. Like, who would have known?
Yeah, no, you wouldn't have expected Jonathan Taylor to be this low, but that's the way it is. I mean, there were a lot more questions about the Jets offense than the Colts offense going into the season, but the script has now flipped where there are now a bunch of questions about the Colts offense and not as many about the Jets offense. And I think a big part of that is because Breece Hall is such a weapon in the backfield. Obviously Zach Wilson has been playing pretty well up to this point, and the offensive line has definitely, gelled with Elijah Vera Tucker really leading the way. He looks really good. He's starting to pay off. But Breece Hall, has been capitalizing on the volume, and he's really just kind of taken over the entire offense. He is the premier weapon in the Jets offense, the fantasy asset to have. I'm big on him at this point. I wasn't as big on him heading into the season because I wasn't sure if this was the type of Jets offense we were going to see. This was, I think, what we're seeing now is what I think was the ceiling heading into the season, but I think that their ceiling might be a little bit higher even than it is right now because of Breece Hall. Breece Hall he's a rookie, he's explosive, and he's just happy to be getting the ball, happy to be playing the game. And that's the type of attitude that you're going to get that's going to produce a lot of fantasy points. I like Breece Hall. Like I said, I'd put him at 7 for this week.
I know a guy who was high on him coming into the year.
Yeah?
I know a guy. I do. Now, let me ask you this question about Jonathan Taylor. He didn't practice on Wednesday, right? It seems like he's still dealing with the ankle sprain. He's going up against Jacksonville, who like the Jaguars just destroyed the Colts right the first time around this year. They only played each other a few weeks ago. And he did relatively well against them on a per carry basis, but the Jaguars have actually been one of the better teams against running backs. They're only allowing 4.2 yards a carry. But a couple of running backs have got some volume against them. And he should be able to get it done, but like, does the ankle injury play into this at all for you? Like, would he be higher if he was fully healthy right now?
I don't even know if he was fully healthy, that I'd put him much higher. I might have him over, and you're going to keep people might be mad at me for saying this. I might have him over Alvin Kamara. That's about it.
Okay,
I don't think Jonathan Taylor in this offense, it's a very low scoring offense now suddenly in Indianapolis. The run game hasn't been what it's been. Jonathan Taylor, maybe not so much that he's lost a step, but it's just the offense isn't working together right now. And as long as that continues to happen, I think Jonathan Taylor is a low end RB1. If that, I think that's kind of where his ceiling is right now. Until we see another explosive performance like we've become accustomed to, I think Jonathan, you can't really rank him much higher.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like his ceiling is overall RB1, like no matter what. You know what I mean? Because he can just explode at any moment. Like I wouldn't be surprised. Like one of these games at some point, 160 yards rushing. You know what I mean? Like 18 carries, 160 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. Like I can see it. But he hasn't been able to get it done since week 1. So we're tempering our expectations for sure.
Yeah.
Moving on to 11 through 20. At 11, we have Dalvin Cook. We talked about him ad nauseum in yesterday's podcast. So you can listen to that and what we think about him. Kenneth Walker at 12. I have him at, as an RB1 before he even makes his first start. And I'm okay with that, given the running backs who I have behind him this week, like Aaron Jones, Devin Singletary. We spoke about, Kenneth Walker a ton this week as well. But Arizona's given up almost 4.5 yards a carry. We're expecting a lot of plays in this game. We talked about this game as well, it being high scoring. So he should be in lineups this week.
Yeah, and we talked about the matchup, like we said. That's the big thing that stands out to me. It's a really good spot for Kenneth Walker to really hit the ground running. I think that he's going to be able to do that in this game pretty easily. As an RB1, if he can turn in an RB1 performance, that's going to be a huge confidence boost to managers that have him. I like it. It's a really
For
good
sure.
matchup.
We have Aaron Jones at 13, Devin Singletary at 14. So I think in a close game, Singletary is going to play close to an every down role. And Vegas is expecting a close game here. Last week, it wasn't a close game. They blew them out. So they involved James Cook. They involved Zach Moss. But in a closer game, I wouldn't expect that. Kind of similar to what we saw 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Eno Benjamin at 15, assuming James Conner doesn't play. I don't have Conner in these rankings. That will change, obviously, if Conner ends up suiting up. And I'll have these rankings updated, moving forward. And by the way, if you do want all of the rankings, you can visit patreon.com/upperhandfantasy. All the rankings will be there either later today or tomorrow. But if Conner does end up playing, I think Benjamin is still in play as like an RB3 flex play with some upside. And, I'd probably have Conner as like a low end RB2 if he does play. Now, let me ask you this.
I think that's
if Conner ends up playing, you playing Conner over Benjamin?
Yeah, I feel like you have to. He is the guy there. He's the early down back. He doesn't have the touchdowns, like I said, but it's just been the Cardinals' offense that's been a little bit off. I don't think you could start, Benjamin over James Conner with James Conner on the field, because at the depth chart, it just tells you all you need to know that James Conner is going to be the guy. Even if, Benjamin is getting some passes, the running game is going to run through James Conner. And if Eno Benjamin, feels a little bit high at 15, we think maybe he looks a little bit high at 15. You have to remember, with the bye weeks, there are a lot of big name running backs out this week on bye. Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, and who would be back, DeAndre Swift. Bunch of guys out, running backs. You're going to be seeing a lot of these guys probably in lineups across your league because, like I said, big name running backs out this week. It's a heavy hitting bye week for the running back position.
Eno Benjamin could play an every down role this week, man. I mean, if we already know Darrell Williams is out. If James Conner is out, I think Eno Benjamin is pretty safe at 15 here because of the fact that he's going to have a role on early downs. He's going to have a role in the receiving game, and he's going to have the goal line role too. So, this is what you want, especially in a high-scoring game against the Seahawks, a terrible, terrible defense. I got Jeff Wilson here at 16. His overall rush share went down last week, as we talked about in yesterday's episode. But this is a good overall matchup for the 49ers. Like, I can't really bet against Jeff Wilson being somewhat efficient on his touches without how good he's looked this year. And Atlanta's allowing 4.7 yards a carry. So this is a solid matchup for him. And he continues to be a solid RB2 for as long as Elijah Mitchell's out.
Yeah, the script for me, what I think is going to end up happening, the game script for the Niners this week is just going to be play solid defense against a relatively rough offense, and then just pound the rock, take control of the game with the run game. Jeff Wilson can do that. They're not asking Jimmy Garoppolo to do too much, which is kind of reminds me of what they're doing in Dallas with Cooper Rush. But they can rely on the run game and a strong defense to win this game. I think that the best fantasy players for the Niners offense are the running backs right now.
If only the Cowboys offense had a good running game. Maybe if they would play Tony Pollard more. I don't know.
It might be an idea.
Know.
I don't
know.
We'll stash that just in case. Yeah.
Melvin Gordon.
I will defend Zeke a little bit. He does not look that bad. He's a solid running back, but not for what the Dallas is paying them. Tony Pollard should be,
he looked better last week.
Yeah, but that's what happens when you give him 22 carries.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah,
I guess. I have Melvin Gordon here at 18. I had him a little bit higher earlier, but then I moved him down. I texted Zach. I'm like, hey, I don't like Melvin Gordon as much. He seems a bit volatile to me, given his fumbling issues and the fact that he might be in a tight leash because of it. He did play the most snaps last week. He did play most of the early downs. He had one goal line snap, and this is a very good matchup against the Chargers defense, giving up the most fantasy points, giving up the most yards per carry, 2 running backs. So I like the matchup. The split overall was like relatively close between him and Mike Boone last week, and Gordon didn't really look great in the first half, and then in the second half, Mike Boone started getting some more work. So don't be surprised if this is a 50-50 split moving forward. And then on top of that, you're like, all right, well, if Latavius Murray is active, you're like, uh-oh. Like, what's going to happen there? Like, what is Latavius Murray's role going to be? And if you have Melvin Gordon, if you have Mike Boone, you're hoping that, Murray's just like a guy sitting on the bench, waiting for an opportunity. And that's about it. But how are you feeling about Melvin Gordon right now? If you have him, you're just like, regardless, you're just starting him in this matchup?
Yeah, he has to be an automatic start because you're either a Javonte Williams owner who picked up Melvin Gordon, real quick if he wasn't available or you traded for him, or you're somebody that took him as a handcuff and you're hoping that, he'd have a little bit more workload. You don't not start Melvin Gordon. He's technically the lead back in Denver. There's no reason not to start him. The matchup isn't that scary. There is, like I said, talent on the Chargers defense, but it's not bad for Melvin Gordon. He can get it done.
By the way, I had Raheem Mostert right before Melvin Gordon at 17. He's a solid RB2. He's been getting all the work. Just keep in mind that he did not practice on Wednesday with a knee injury. So just monitor that. Raheem Mostert is one of those dudes that if he gets hurt, if he has an injury on Wednesday, like you have to pay more attention to it. So hopefully you didn't drop Chase Edmonds. If this is actually a real injury, who knows? He could come straight back to practice today and be fine. So just keep an eye on it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and for us, you kind of prophesized that. So that would be something if this ended up being an injury.
I did not prophesize nothing. I didn't prophesize nothing. Okay.
I don't know. The prophecy read, as I remember you saying it, you can't rely on Raheem Mostert to stay healthy with this type of workload for, 12 more games? It's funny that's happening already, but I'm not saying that you're calling injuries, you're betting injuries.
Zach is reading the podcast notes from yesterday. He's like, and I quote.
Yeah, I pulled it right up. It's like a scroll. You open it.
Oh, man. David Montgomery, have him here at 19. Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's at 20. You're hoping that he scores a touchdown with Clyde Edwards-Hilaire? Like, that's what you're hoping for? Yeah, that's what you want. Miles Sanders, I hope he scores a touchdown. Miles Sanders at 21 against Dallas. J.K. Dobbins at 22, followed by Travis Etienne, Kareem Hunt, and James Robinson. This is the first time this year, outside of maybe going into week 1, where I'm ranking Etienne over James Robinson. But Robinson is trending down. Etienne is trending up. Robinson, he's averaging 4.1 yards a carry. Etienne's averaging 4.9 yards a carry. Robinson's averaging 5.6 yards per reception. Etienne's averaging 11.3 yards per reception. Etienne is the better player, the more explosive player. And I'd expect this backfield to continue to shift in Etienne's direction as it has over the past couple weeks.
Right. And where do I feel like we've seen this shift kind of happening before? Oh, yeah, New York with Breece Hall. So if this happens, and it kind of happened over a couple of weeks, and now Breece Hall is now, the undisputed pretty much RB1 for the Jets. We've kind of seen the shift happening, and it's been, you don't see it in the box score. If you look at the underlying usage, like we've been talking about in the podcast the past few weeks, Travis Etienne's kind of been stepping up, taking a lead a little bit. If he has another strong game, this could be Travis Etienne's backfield by next week. I think that he's in a good spot, and he could have like a Breece Hall type effect if you drafted him. He's slow to get on a roll, but it seems like he's trending that way, and his production should go up from what we've seen so far. Very similar to what Breece Hall did. Just took Breece Hall a week or two less to get into that lead role. I think Travis Etienne's kind of destined for that as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, it was very tough to just hand it over to Etienne because of how good James Robinson looked over the first couple of weeks, right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, well, keep giving it to him. Kareem Hunt is at 24. He's getting 10 to 15 touches a game, and we know he can be an explosive player and get touchdowns at times. So I'm okay throwing him in my lineup, especially during these bye weeks. James Robinson at 25, we mentioned him. Zeke at 26, Najee Harris at 27. We talked about we talked about who else is here. I'm very curious to see what Najee Harris's share looks like with Jaylen Warren this week. I think he'll do better than he did over the past couple of weeks. I think there's a chance that he can get better, with this offense hopefully improving. But
hence his ranking upgrade from 30 to 27 this week.
31
was
to 27. Now let me ask you this: you see the guys here, right? Like we have Tony Pollard at 28, followed by AJ Dillon at 29, and then Rachaad White to close out the top 30. And those three that I just mentioned are pretty much like just simply upside plays, right? With Tony Pollard, you're hoping for a big play. which he's had a couple over the past couple of weeks. With AJ Dillon, you're hoping for a goal line touchdown, and with Leonard Fournette,
Rashad White.
Wait,
yeah,
sorry, Rashad White.
Graphic error. Yeah.
I fell for it too.
Yeah, well, you got it right the first time. Yeah, it was a tight morning. That was my fault. But yes, Rashad White at 30. You're saying.
I am just pinning that real quick. Nope, not the right one. Rashad White at 30. Yeah, so Rashad White, and you're hoping that he gets the receptions. He had 4 catches and 5 catches, I think it was, over the past over the past 2 weeks. So, he does have some full PPR value right now, and I think he has more full PPR value than someone like Pollard or AJ Dillon at this point. If you're looking for somebody to just give you a few points in PPR leagues. So, let me ask you this now: are you starting any of those guys over Najee Harris? Probably not, right?
I want to say Tony Pollard, but I think Najee Harris is a much safer floor. If you want to talk about the player with the highest upside out of this bunch, it's Tony Pollard, just because he could be a home run hitter. But Najee Harris, I think you start him over Tony Pollard. I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure I start Najee Harris over AJ Dillon. I don't know. I feel like AJ Dillon, is liable to have a big game any week if the touches fall his way. Where Najee Harris, even if he gets the touches, he's kind of just been meh.
If Najee Harris truly has his passing work taken away, right, as we've seen over the past couple of weeks, like last week was a tough week to see it because it's like, I want to, like on third downs, he's kind of been taken off the field a little bit over the past couple of weeks, and that's not good. I want to see what happens this week. Hopefully Tampa doesn't go all, to like a 30-0 lead, and now we have another game where no sample size. We can't really tell what this situation is going to look like. Unless the Steelers just get blown out every single week, and that is the norm for them. I think if Najee Harris gets removed from that passing down work and Jaylen Warren is the primary guy there, that's going to be terrible for his value, and like he's going to plummet out of the top 30, honestly. Because if he's just an early down back, it's not good for his value at all.
At that point, he becomes like a Rashad Penny player, but without the explosiveness,
without the talent.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, without the explosiveness.
Exactly. So, yeah, that's tough. How do these rankings look to you? Like James Robinson, Zeke, Harris, Pollard, Dillon, and Rashad White.
I agree with that, like I said, except maybe I'd put, I don't want to say Pollard over Najee Harris, but I kind of do. I put Pollard over Zeke just because the upside. Zeke is he's a floor player at this point, and I think his floor is pretty darn low anyway because he's liable. He's no longer the touchdown machine. Dallas isn't running into the end zone very much. If they're scoring touchdowns, it's off long runs from Tony Pollard or passes to CeeDee Lamb. Ezekiel Elliott, where Dallas used to make money in the red zone, where that's where Ezekiel Elliott made his money, they haven't been there. So they haven't delivered Ezekiel Elliott to touchdowns, and you've been seeing stat lines like 13 carries for 56 yards, which nets you 5 points, which is nothing. So I'd put Pollard over Zeke. I maybe flip the two.
I get that. I like it. Okay, guys, that's about it. For our full rankings, you can go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/upperhandfantasy. The link is in the description of the podcast and the YouTube video. So, you can go check out the full rankings there. We'll have flex rankings as well with blurbs on these players talking about the matchups and all that kind of stuff. So, also we talked about Underdog. I went over a bunch of those picks early on in the Thursday night preview. If you missed the first part of this episode, you can go all the way to the front and you can see all the picks that I'd like for tonight on Underdog. And we'll also have a post out later on Instagram as well. But you can visit Underdog, download the app, use code UPPERHAND, and you will end up getting your first deposit doubled up to $100. But we appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. If you can rate and review the podcast, that would mean the world to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever platform you use. Appreciate you guys. Take it easy. We'll see you tomorrow with the wide receiver and tight end rankings. See ya.